Okay, here we are, chapter 13. I know, the last video was supposed to be the last one, but this book just won't end. We have 25 more pages to go. I don't understand. Alright, chapter 13. Maybe she'd heard wrong. Pushing the heavy shelving unit under the window had made a lot of noise. But no, she'd heard just fine. A car had pulled into the hangar. The squeal of tires had to be Hardy. She was out of time. Heart racing, Mac glanced over at the door to make sure the pieces of the ruler she'd broken and wedged underneath were in place. They wouldn't keep Hardy and his men out, but they would slow them down long enough for her to escape, she hoped. Of course, she would have been out of here 15 minutes ago if the shelf hadn't been so damn heavy to move. She was probably taking her life in her hands, climbing up on the precariously balanced boxes she put on top of the shelf so she could reach the window. But she didn't have a choice. She couldn't wait around for Gage and his pack to show up and save her. Oh, she knew they'd come. She just worried that she'd be dead by the time they got here. She hated to think about it, but there was a real possibility that Brooks, Cooper, and Becker had succumbed to their injuries after trying to rescue her. Gage might not even know what happened to her. Max swallowed hard at the painful thought and reached for another box just as footsteps sounded outside the door. She froze, holding her breath. Go away, she prayed silently. Just give me one more minute. The doorknob jiggled. Muttering a curse, she hefted another case of paper to the top shelf, then scrambled up after it. The boxes of paper made the unit top-heavy as hell, and it wobbled wildly under her weight. Just stay together long enough for me to reach the window. It would be just her luck to have the shelf collapse. Hardy wouldn't have to kill her. She'd break her neck all on her own. The door shuddered as someone big slammed against it, but her wedges held. She quickly finished stacking the 2 cases of paper, then climbed on top of them. The shelf swayed dangerously, but she kept herself balanced in the center of her makeshift ladder and kept going. I don't know what you think you're gaining by this, Miss Stone, Hardy shouted over the whir of a nearby jet engine. I was only going to shoot you in the head, but if you make me work for it, I'm going to make it so much more painful for you. So scary. Not exactly a great motivational speaker, was he? Once he was trying to get her to hurry even more. Mac grabbed the windowsill as the gunshot rang out. The bullet went clean through the door and smacked into the wall near the shelf where she was standing on. If she wasn't so focused on keeping herself from tumbling off her precarious perch, she would have screamed for sure. She grabbed the handle and levered it upward, then pushed open the window. It only tilted out about a foot, but that was more than what she needed. She yanked herself up to the window frame and shimmied through the narrow gap as more bullets tore through the door. If Gage and the pack were anywhere nearby, they'd have heard the gunshots, right? I can't even bring myself to care about this woman. I hope she dies. But she's not going to die, obviously. Mac didn't climb through the window as much as she fell through it. She tried to hold on to the edge of the frame so she could hang down, then drop to the ground, but she ended up tumbling out the window in a nearly horizontal position. The asphalt came up to smack her faster than she expected, and for a moment everything sparked, and then went dark as pain engulfed the entire right side of her body. How did she get out of the... Okay, whatever. But the sound of shooting, coupled with Hardy's furious shots, jarred her out of her blackness. She winced and crawled up to her feet. Crap, it felt like she'd broken everything important in her body. Get outside and find that bitch, Hardy ordered. Damn it, they were already in the room. It wouldn't take them long to figure out where she went. In the darkness, Mac looked from the open runways and planes on her right to the long, continuous row of hangars on her left. She'd never make it very far if she tried to run in a straight line across the open airfield. Hardy's men would see her and shoot her down before she went 100 feet, so she turned left and stumbled to the hangars as fast as her beat-up body would allow. She needed to find some place to hide until Gage and his pack could find her. Hurry up, Gage. If you were planning to make a dramatic entrance, please do it now. South Salinas Air, Becker called from the backseat of Xander's SUV. North 24th Avenue. Are you sure? Gage had a fight to keep from snarling as he glanced over his shoulder. Clearly, he's fucking sure, dude. Finding Hardy's hangar had turned out to be harder than the IT guru had thought. They were all parked on the side of the expressway, waiting on Becker to give him a location. But for the 1,000th time, Gage questioned the intelligence of putting all his eggs in one basket and bringing the whole team out here, based on a muffled conversation a beat-up man had heard while locked in a trunk. He glanced at his watch again, and this time he didn't even try to hold in the growl that escaped his lips. It was after midnight already. Hardy's men had taken Mackenzie over an hour ago. This was taking too damn long. I'm sure, Becker said. I gave up trying to find a connection between Hardy and one of the general aviation operations out here. Instead, I tapped into the security feed for the cameras that surround the airport. I found the car that brought Mac here and followed its camera to camera until it stopped at a small charter service called South Salinas. Gage wanted to believe Becker, but this was Mackenzie's life here. Well, what are you going to do? Just fucking sit on the side of the goddamn road? How do you know it's the car she was in? Becker spun his laptop around so Gage could see it. Not many dark sedans driving at this time of night with the rear passenger side door ripped off. Gage grabbed the radio and thumbed the button. Northeast quadrant of the airport, he ordered. East 16th to North 24th. Stop 3 blocks short and follow the plan. Xander floored and shot onto the expressway, heading to the general aviation side of Dallas-Fort Worth. Gage glanced at his watch again, then looked at the map of the airport spread out on his lap. He locked onto the spot where the hangar for South Salinas Air was located. He'd been staring at the map so long over the past hour that he practically memorized it. He wished he knew exactly where in that building Mackenzie was being held. I don't think it's that complicated to memorize the map of an airport, honestly. It didn't matter. He'd be able to pinpoint her location the second he got within a couple of 100 feet of her. Then he'd get Mackenzie back. Assuming she was still alive, a part of his mind whispered darkly. He swore, refusing to even consider the possibility. We'll find her in time, Xander said quietly as he took the off-ramp that led into airport property. Gage didn't see anything. Mac's smart, and she's spunky as hell, Xander shook his head. I tried to scare her the other night when she came to the compound to see you, but she didn't back down. My eyes were yellow, my claws were out, and I showed her my fangs. Even growled, but she didn't flinch. I hate this book so much. Gage smiled. That sounded like Mackenzie. If anyone could keep herself alive in a situation like this, it would be her. He forced himself not to look at his watch again. They'd be outside the hangar in minutes. Then it would be up to him and his pack to get Mackenzie out of safety. That was what they did for a living. They got hostages out alive. And that was what they were going to do. They were going to get Mackenzie out alive, and if Hardy and his men had harmed a single hair on her head, Gage was going to shred the fucking lot of them. Mac half walked, half ran, for as long as she could, praying the whole time that she'd find someone willing to help her. But all the open hangars she passed were dark and empty. Her knee and ankle throbbed so badly she thought she was going to drop to the ground any moment. Not that she could keep running out in the open like this for much longer. One of Hardy's men was bound to see her sooner or later. Time to stop trying to find help and fall back on her original plan, hiding. Wasn't that her original plan? Hiding? She started past the next 3 empty hangars before settling on a big aluminum building filled with half a dozen small planes, rolling toolboxes and wall lockers. There had to be a place to hide in there. Mac hobbled as far back into the hangar as she could, then slumped to the floor behind a big toolbox. Just bending her knee that much made her want to yelp in pain, but she bit her lip and tried to make herself as small as possible. She wasn't a moment too soon. Within 20 seconds of slipping to the floor, she heard footsteps thudding against the pavement. Keep going. Please don't look in here. She'd been beyond lucky so far, but this time her prayers weren't answered. She didn't know how many people were out there, but they'd stopped in front of the hangar she was in. I've got this one. Check the next, Patterson shouted. She couldn't have gotten very far. Mac tried to call underneath the toolbox, but the space wasn't big enough. Damn it. If Patterson walked around behind this line of toolboxes, he was going to see her, even in the darkened interior. She looked around for another hiding place, but as badly as her leg hurt, she wasn't sure how well she'd be able to get to it, even if she found one. If she gets away, I'm going to kill you in her place. You know that, right? The sound of Hardy's voice made her jump. Hardy and Patterson were both searching the hangar. Her luck was getting worse by the second. She heard a clicking sound that she recognized from her shooting lessons with Gage. One of the men had thumbed the hammer back on the pistol. Unless I shoot you first, Patterson answered his boss. Oh, please shoot each other. Hardy laughed. Find her, and I'll let you bring her with us to Mexico. You can do anything you want with her until we get there. Then I'll shoot her and mail the parts back to Dixon in a box. Crap. Deal, Patterson said. But we need to get out of here soon. All that shooting is going to bring the cops out here. Colors and the others will keep them busy, Hardy snorted. What, did you think I was going to bring them to Mexico with us? Wait, don't we have an extradition treaty with Mexico? Patterson blew out a breath. Damn, you can be a bastard sometimes, you know that? When we find Stone, I'll show you what kind of bastard I really am. Footsteps came into view on the other side of the toolbox Max was hiding behind. She cringed and quickly looked at the shelves to her right. Could she make it there without being seen? She was about to risk it when a long, low wolf howl filled the air. Gage. What the hell is that? Hardy asked. The howl came again, closer this time. It was followed by another, then another, and another. Really? Each from a different direction, each bouncing and echoing off the metal buildings until it was impossible to figure out where the eerie sounds were coming from. We need to get the hell out of here, Patterson said. Footsteps headed away from her. Let's forget about Stone and get on that plane. Mac grinned. That's right, you better run. It wasn't just Gage out there, it was his whole pack. For the first time since Hardy's men had grabbed her, she started thinking that maybe this was going to end okay. What the hell are you talking about? Hardy shouted. It's just a bunch of coyotes howling at the moon. I don't think so. Patterson's voice was further away now. Something attacked us when we grabbed the reporter. It took out Dawn's sedan and everyone in it. Then it ripped Jasper right out of the back seat of my car, taking the door with it. I tried to stop it, but it was too fast. The howls sounded like they were getting closer. Mac took a quick peek around the side of the toolbox. Patterson was standing all the way out by the big roll-up door at the hangar's entrance, looking back toward the building she'd escaped from. He shifted from foot to foot like he was about to take off running any second. Hardy laughed. What, do you think the big bad boogeyman is out there coming to get us? Shouts came from somewhere outside, followed immediately by a sound of gunfire. I don't know, Patterson muttered, but I'm not hanging around to find out. Something tells me you're not going to make the plane to Mexico. Mac held her breath, waiting for Hardy to say something snide in reply, but instead loud gunshots filled the building. She covered her ears with her hands and hunkered down. What the hell was that? Come back here, you fucking cowards, so I can shoot you like a piece of shit you are. Hands still over her ears, she peeked out from behind the toolbox again and saw Hardy standing in the open doorway, a huge automatic pistol in his hand that dwarfed the one she'd fired at the SWAT compound. She couldn't believe he'd shot at Patterson. Now she just had to wait for Hardy to leave and she'd be home free. She knelt down beside the toolbox again, listening for the sounds of Hardy's retreating footsteps. When she didn't hear anything, she leaned close to the floor and looked under the rolling toolbox. Hardy was nowhere in sight. She frowned. Hadn't she heard him leave? He was gone. That was all that mattered. Max slowly started to get up, only to scream when a hand grabbed her hair from behind and yanked her to her feet. Looks like I'll be making that plane after all, Hardy whispered in her ear as he shoved the big cannon of a gun to her head. Gage slipped quietly through the narrow alley between the two hangars, silently making his way along the metal wall on one side, while Xander and his Brooks moved along the other. He inhaled deeply, sifting through the barrage of scents and the night breeze that moved across the airfield. He couldn't smell Mackenzie yet, but he hadn't expected to, not this far from where she was being held. He and his team would slip quietly around to the airfield side of the hangars, approaching from down one, while the rest of the pack headed straight for the south entrance of South Salinas Air and the crowd of armed men they'd seen there. He told Mike and his team to be as loud as possible when they initiated contact to draw Hardy's men away. Then he and his entry team would slip into the hangar, find Mackenzie, and get her out before anyone even knew they were there. This would have been a pretty simple hostage rescue op if it wasn't for the one factor. A lot of the hangars in this part of the airfield were constructed of lightweight metal. Without exactly knowing where Mackenzie or any of the other innocent bystanders were, there was no way his team could risk firing their weapons in the direction of the hangar. The bullets would likely go straight through every wall in the place and keep on going. Mike and his team were going to have to deal with Hardy's men without weapons. Well, without traditional weapons, anyway. For the first time ever, Gage had given his pack the freedom to fight the way they preferred. Claws, fangs, or muscles, I don't care how you do it, he said. Those men took Mackenzie. By the time we're done, I want them to be sorry they were ever born. Gage only prayed the pure and simple shock value of a pack of werewolves hitting them would be the kind of destruction he needed. When they reached the airfield side of the hangars, a few buildings from South Salinas, Gage tapped his radio mic 3 times in rapid succession, the go signal. Immediately, the long, drawn-out howl shattered the normal background noise of the airfield. Moments later, another howl sounded a little further away, and then another one closer, and at the same time, Gage knew Mike would be killing all the power in the hangar, throwing everything in the area in total darkness. We can do this. We can do this! I think that should do the job of attracting some attention, Xander whispered. A few seconds later, Gage heard gunfire coming from the front of South Salinas hangar, followed closely by shouts as Mike's team hit the men there. Yep, that's a distraction, all right, Brooks agreed. Gage started towards the hangar where the sounds of running footsteps caught his attention. Shit, Hardy must have had some of his men stationed along the side of the hangar, too. Time for Plan B. He pointed at Xander and Brooks, then at the direction of the footsteps. He pointed at himself and motioned he'd continue to the hangar. Xander frowned, clearly less than thrilled with the idea of Gage going on alone, but his squad leader didn't argue. The goal was to get Mackenzie out, and Gage wouldn't be able to do that with the bad guys chasing him from behind. Gage hesitated for half a second as Xander and Brooks stepped out from behind the concealment of the little alley they were in and streaked towards the approaching men. Their attack was so sudden and vicious that Hardy's men barely had time to raise their weapons and fire. Gage didn't wait to see more. Turning, he sprinted towards the target, hoping the noise on the side of the hangar didn't ruin their plan. The savage growls behind him told him Xander had shifted at least partially. Human vocal cords couldn't make those sounds. He had no doubt that at some point Brooks would be dropping his tactical gear and shifting to his full wolf form. While several of the team members would handle the full wolf shift, Xander, Cooper, Brady, Remy, and Carter, including... What? While several of the team members could handle a full wolf shift, Xander, Cooper, Brady, Remy, and Carter included. Brooks was the only one besides Gage who could handle anything close to an instantaneous transformation. Gage imagined when that happened, the shots were going to be a lot louder. He needed to get Mackenzie out. He needed to get Mackenzie out before that. Really instantaneous transformation? I mean, you're shifting. I don't know if that's possible. Physics, Arthur. Physics. Gage was nearing the big open doors of the South Salinas hangar and the private jet running its engines when an unexpectedly powerful scent hit him, forcing him to slow. It was Mackenzie's, but the scent wasn't coming from inside the hangar. It was coming from outside, and it was close. Then he saw Mackenzie step out from the entry alcove 20 feet away. Gage had almost dropped to his knees in relief. She'd gotten away and was already safe. That was when he realized she wasn't alone. Hardy was right behind her, holding the big Desert Eagle of his to her head. You and your cop friends are going to let me get on my plane and fly out of here, Hardy ordered from where he hid behind Mackenzie. If you don't, I'll shoot your girlfriend right in front of you. Mac tried to run to Gage, but Hardy tightened his hold on her hair, yanking her back. She stifled a scream and attempted to twist his grip, but it was useless. He literally held her by the scruff. She tensed, ready to jab her elbow back and smash the jerk in the face, but immediately went still as Hardy pressed his pistol harder against her temple. Drop it, Dixon, or I'll shoot her now. Hardy pulled her backward so that most of his body was hidden by the edge of the door. I swear I'll put a bullet right through her head. It took everything in Mac not to give in to the overwhelming urge to struggle against Hardy. Now wasn't the time to do anything stupid. Gage was here and obviously had a plan on how to deal with the situation. This was what he did for a living. She just had to be ready to react once she figured out what his plan was. She searched Gage's face, silently begging him to give her a hint, but he was focused on Hardy. Then, faster than she could have imagined, he moved in a blur, slipping aside the open door of the hangar with him and disappeared into the darkness. The rapid move shocked Hardy just as much as it shocked her. The man turned, yanking her around with him like a shield. I'm telling you, I'll shoot her. A low chuckle came from out of the darkness. Then what will you do without a woman to hide behind? Hardy moved slightly away from the corner where he was hiding, careful to keep her in front of him as he tried to get an angle on Gage. Now that Thug couldn't seem to figure out who he wanted to cover with his pistol, her or the patch of darkness where Gage was hiding. Come out and show yourself, Dixon, Hardy ordered, and you'd better be holding a weapon, or we'll both get to find out what I'll do without her to hide behind. No answer. Max strained to see in the darkness. She couldn't even guess where Gage was. Could he shoot Hardy while the man was hiding behind her? Hardy backed out of the hangar and into the tarmac, the pistol still firmly planted against her head. Come out where I can see you, Dixon, or I'll kill her. Mac gasped as the shape moved out of the shadows. For a moment her eyes couldn't comprehend what she was seeing. The tall, broad-shouldered figure she'd expected was instead replaced by a large gray wolf. Gage. He told her he could turn into a wolf, but she hadn't expected him to be so huge, or so beautiful. All Mac could do was stare at him, transfixed by his amazing presence. Really? What the hell? Hardy muttered. Gage bared his teeth in a snarl as he charged, moving so fast that he was nothing more than a big gray blur. The author doesn't know how to articulate fastness. Mac barely had time to scream before Gage slammed into her and Hardy. The blow probably would have broken her in half if Gage had actually struck her squarely, but his big front paws skimmed over her right shoulder, hitting the taller Hardy with the force of a moving truck. What? Still, the glancing blow left her flying. She hit the ground hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. Hardy's gun went off, but the sound was drowned by Gage's snarl. The heart in her throat, Mac rolled over onto her hip to see Gage clamp down on Hardy's arm with his enormous teeth. After a few savage shakes, Hardy cried out in pain and dropped the gun. Mac lunged for the weapon. She didn't know if Gage needed her help, but she was determined to give it to him anyway. She scrambled to pick up the gun, cursing as she fumbled to get her hands around the large grip. She turned around just in time to see Gage going for Hardy's throat. She quickly looked away. Even after everything that Hardy had done to her, she knew this wasn't going to be something she wanted to see. When she looked back a few minutes later, Gage was standing over Hardy's lifeless body. As if sensing her eyes on him, Gage turned his big head towards her. He gazed at her with those mesmerizing gold eyes she'd come to love. They were filled with so many emotions she almost cried. Can we leave? He took a slow step toward her, then another and another, until he was right in front of her. He seemed even bigger up close. She set the gun on the ground, then went up on her knees so she could look him in the eyes. Then, because she couldn't help herself, she wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his soft, thick fur. Movement out to the right caught her attention. She lifted her head a little, expecting to see the rest of the pack, but instead it was Roscoe Patterson. Something glinted in the glow of the distant airfield light, a gun, and he was aiming it at Gage. Without a thought, Mac grabbed the pistol from the ground, somehow getting both hands around it on the first try, then instinctively aimed it like Gage had taught her. She squeezed the trigger as smoothly as her thundering heart would allow. He's a werewolf. Wouldn't he smell him? The boom from the thing was deafening, but that was nothing compared to the shockwave that reverberated through her. She'd planned to fire a second shot, but found herself sitting on her ass, the gun somewhere on the ground. She threw a quick glance in Patterson's direction as she frantically searched for the weapon, and was stunned to see him lying on the ground. Repetition. He wasn't moving, and in the darkness, she could see the big stain slowly spreading across his chest. Oh God, she killed him. She'd done it to save Gage's life, and would have done it again if she had to, but still. Gage ran over to check anyway. He sniffed the body once, then looped back over to her. His eyes searched her face as if asking, "Are you okay?" She sank her fingers in the fur around his ears, tugging him closer. Then she wrapped her arms around his neck again and buried her face in his scruff like before. She might have cried a little then. She was doing a lot of these days, but she couldn't be sure. Gage didn't seem to mind. He simply rubbed his muzzle against her face and let her hold him. God, she could really get used to this. After a while, Mac realized she couldn't hear gunshots anymore, that it must mean it's all over. She prayed the rest of the pack was okay. She pulled back to give find Gage appraising her with questioning eyes. She smiled at him. "I'm fine," she assured him, but he didn't look convinced. "They didn't hurt me." That seemed to appease him. He nuzzled her neck with his huge snout and chuffed quietly. "Yes, I love you too," she said with a soft laugh. If someone had told her that one day she'd be carrying on a one-sided conversation with the werewolf, she would have called them crazy. But as she gazed into Gage's expressive eyes, she decided that maybe the conversation wasn't one-sided after all. She ran her hand over his fur. "Thank you for coming to get me." He chuffed again in answer, then jerked his head toward the hangar. It took her a moment to realize he wanted her to follow him. When she nodded, he began to walk that way. Now that Gage was here, the pain in her knee didn't seem as bad as before, and she fell into step beside him, admiring how graceful he was for a creature so big. It was like walking with a pony. They had reached the hangar, yet when she heard the sirens approach... They hadn't reached the hangar yet when she heard the sirens approach. Inside the building, Gage stopped beside a pile of something on the floor. It took a second to figure out what she was looking at, and then it struck her. "I never thought about it. You're naked under all that fur." It probably should have been obvious, but she hadn't actually thought about it. What? Really? She chuffed again, not once but 3 times. Then his big red tongue came lolling out. She realized she was hearing the werewolf equivalent of a laugh. "What, you think that's funny?" she asked as she crossed her arms and looked at him. "Wonder how much you'd be laughing if the cops show up and find you standing here naked after you turn back into a man. I'm assuming you are planning to change back before the cops get here, right?" Now was her turn to laugh as she got to see what a werewolf looked like when he blushed. Okay, Chapter 14. Let's do it. Chapter 14. "You still working on your story?" Zach asked, gesturing to her laptop as he slowly sat down at the picnic table where she'd been parked for the last 15 minutes, enjoying the unseasonably mild day and the very pleasant view of Gage and his pack, playing volleyball with their shirts off. She was never going to get tired of that. Mac dragged herself away from all that eye candy to turn her attention to her friend. Zach had been out of the hospital for a full 10 days, and he still looked beat up. The swelling around his eyes and mouth had gone down, but it would take time for the bruises on his face and body to heal completely, and he was going to have to baby those broken ribs for a few weeks. She just thanked God he was up and about. Judging by the pile of food on his plate, his appetite had finally come back too. That was a relief. He was tall and lanky at the best of times. She was pretty sure he'd at least lost 10 or 15 pounds since Hardy Schoon had beaten the crap out of him. "Yeah," she said in answer to his question, "but I'm having a hard time coming up with a story that won't get Gage and his men into hot water. Or me, for the matter." Zach glanced up from cutting his burger into small pieces. "I can see why you might have a problem with that. It's kind of hard explaining how the SWAT team came to your rescue on their own, killing Hardy and most of his men before the rest of the DPT even knew where they were. And don't forget the part about me shooting Patterson," she added. "I'm pretty sure that little tidbit doesn't even show up in the official police report." He laughed and winced. "Sorry," she said. He waved a hand at her until he could talk again. "Just a suggestion. I know how much it would bother you to just drop the whole thing and let people figure out for themselves what happened to Hardy, but I think this is, in this case, where the world is better off not knowing the whole truth and nothing about the truth." Such bad writing. Mac didn't say anything. Actually, the same thought had been bouncing around in her head for the past few days. There'd be questions, but most people would assume the ruthless business mogul had gotten what he deserved. Would it be so awful if the world didn't know the details? Then stop fucking writing the goddamn story. "You know, you might be right about this," she told Zach. He did a double take before going back to cutting up his burger. Who cuts up their burger? "Well, damn, getting engaged to Gage must be good for you. I never thought I'd hear you agree to drop a story, even if it's for your own good." She grinned, glancing down at the beautiful diamond ring on her left hand. "Funny how a piece of jewelry could change your perspective on a lot of things. He taught me there are more important things than the great and almighty journalistic search for truth." Yes, getting married is more important. Zach nodded as he ate. Then he closed his eyes and groaned in appreciation. Matt couldn't blame him. Apparently, SWAT held these cookouts at their compound at least once a month, and it turned out that they really knew what they were doing. Xander, the officer in charge of the grill at today's cookout, had put out a spread worthy of that cute chef on Food Network. She'd eaten more than her fair share of barbecues proof. She put her hands on the table behind her and leaned back, happy to sit there with Zach while she watched Gage run around playing in the sand. He was going to look like a sugar cookie by the time he was done. Not that she minded. She definitely enjoyed spending time with him in the shower, getting squeaky clean. I'm like, grossed out. Taking a shower was the first thing they did when they'd gotten back to their apartment after the rescue at the hangar that night. Then Gage took her to bed and made love to her until they were both exhausted. When they woke up, they did it all over again. The only time they got out of bed was to eat something. Well, that wasn't quite true. Gage had insisted on leaving once they could run some mysterious errand. When he'd come back, he'd taken her back to bed again, then slipped the diamond ring on her hand and asked her to be his one. They made love and spent the rest of the day talking about the future. Mac even convinced Gage into shifting into his wolf form again. He looked stunned. Right here? She nodded, refusing to let up until he did. Then she curled up against his big furry body and fallen asleep when he'd rested his chin on his huge paws. It had been perfect. After coming from the volleyball court interrupted her daydreaming, Mac tripped out of her thoughts to see the game breaking up. Sure you don't want to play the next game? Gage asked as she swept in and hugged her. Nah, my knee's still a little sore. I'd rather watch anyway, she said. Okay, but if you change your mind, there's always room for you. He leaned in to kiss her, groaning softly. You taste good enough to eat, said the big bad wolf. So fucking cliche. She laughed as he nuzzled her neck. Down, big boy. I'm right here, Zach reminded them. My face might be messed up, but I can hear you just fine, and if you keep talking like that, I'm going to be ill. You and me both. Mac laughed. She knew she should behave herself because Zach was still recovering, but she couldn't resist teasing him. Maybe we can slip off to the operations vehicle again, she said to Gage. You know I love all those cameras in there. Okay, Zach picked up his food and got to his feet. I'm going to find another place to eat that's better for my digestion. You two lovebirds later. See you two lovebirds later. Gage chuckled as Zach slowly walked over to join Xander by the grill. Keep an eye on Zach, Xander, she said softly. I don't want him wearing himself out. Even though the grill was at least 100 feet away, Xander gave her a quick nod. There was something to be said for exosensitive hearing. Becker, Cooper, and the two team medics, Trevino and Duncan, moved over to join them. Without a word, Cooper plunked down a folding chair, which Zach sank into without a complaint. Gage climbed up behind her and pulled her back against his chest. What are you smiling at? Mac pulled her arms around her middle and snuggled closer to all that muscle. He was covered in sand, but she didn't care. I was just thinking how nice it is being part of the pack. I hope they don't get tired of me hanging around all the time. Not going to happen, he assured her. Like I told you, you're one of the pack now. You're also a beautiful reminder that the one isn't just an urban legend. There's a reason for all the guys who believe they might find the woman who was meant for them, like I did. This book is never going to end. She tipped her head back and kissed him, only to pull away as a thought came to her. What is it? Gage asked. I was just wondering if there might be a way for me to help each of the guys find their one. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Unfortunately, I don't think it works that way. They just have to keep looking until they stumble across the right woman. Besides, I don't think my team would appreciate you getting involved in their love lives. Max sighed. He was probably right. Then again, maybe not. She smiled up at Gage. You sure about that? He looked across the yard to survey his pack, who'd all stopped what they were doing to give her their full attention. One by one, each wolf grinned. For some reason, I don't think your pack agrees, she said. Gage groaned. Why do I think this has the potential to get really messy? Mac only laughed and kissed him again. And it's over. It's done. It's finished. Finally, we are finished with this book. That means we get to start something new. I don't know if the next book is any better, but hopefully it's better than this crappy book. So, that's it then. Oh no. Okay, there we go. Bye.